Welcome to a special edition of Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. In this video, I'm going to give you my top 5 best practices that I've learned working at Google. Let's go. Okay, tip number 1, email. Email is a great tool. It can be a very efficient way of disseminating information, but it's also, in my opinion at least, a pernicious time waster. So top tip working with email is try to batch process. I check my email in the morning, in the afternoon, sometimes during the day, but just in scheduled half-hour slots, and I literally don't look at it in between, and that helps me have some focus on what I'm trying to work on and avoid email taking up all the time. Second, relating to email, only CC people that you need to take action or who need to take note of vital information. I think it's a modern piece of sloppy behavior, I guess, and carelessness. Just CCing the world, it clutters people's email boxes. They do feel compelled to have a look, so no need to copy the world. Just CC people who need to pay attention to the email. Third, keep it short. An email is something that should be read in a matter of minutes. Probably if it's longer than that, people will either ignore it and not read it, or park it and leave it for a special read-through later. I think a good discipline is to aim for 5 minutes, and if you're one of those people who put links in your email, don't. An email should be self-contained in the sense that you don't have to sort of click down through the Russian dolls to get the message. Tip number 2, calendar management. We're all pretty busy. I know my schedule can get ferociously busy, shame on me. So I've had to develop some techniques for calendar management. The first tip is have time scheduled with yourself for deep work. It can be really easy to switch from task to task to task, and there's good brain science that suggests that that's a very inefficient way to work. It can take up to 20 minutes to get back into the zone. So if you're sort of doing a task for 20 minutes or half an hour and then switching to another one and doing that over and over again, it can be quite poor for productivity. So do schedule time for deep work. I have, I think, 3 slots per week, 2 hours each, for really deep work and the project work that I need to get done. Second, try no meetings Friday. I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Just clear the diary, and it just A, gives you a nice sort of coast downhill into the weekend, but B, it can be a great way of clearing what remains in the week, and also setting up well for the following week. So no meetings Friday, I think, is a great discipline. Third tip in relation to calendar management is schedule meetings for either 25 minutes or 50 minutes, not half an hour or 1 hour. Why? Because certainly if you're using an office, you need time to prepare for the next meeting and sometimes get to the next meeting. And if you have meetings scheduled back to back to back to back, then often one cascades into the other and you're late for every meeting in the day. We actually have a calendar system embedded in Google that automatically schedules only for 25 minutes or 50 minutes. It was one of the great innovations that Larry Page introduced. Tip number 3, running meetings. Meetings are an important part of everyone's work life. They can be a real time waster as well. So I find it's really important to have a few simple rules of thumb in relation to meetings. First of all, never take a meeting or schedule a meeting without a clear agenda. You can just show up and just waste the whole time having a bit of chit-chat. That's very nice if you're doing that over a beer or a wine or a lunch or something, but particularly useful if you're trying to do a business meeting. Second, pay attention to the people in the room, and if you're doing video meetings, often you'll find yourself in a room and with some people attending on the video. That's very, very common in Google, and it's really important in that situation to sort of read the room and include those people, particularly those people appearing on the video. Treat them as though they're there, and I often go to them first actually when we're taking input. 3, in relation to meetings, think about the purpose of the meeting. I think there are 3 types of meeting, or 3 types of meeting that should be called anyway. The first is to provide important, vital information where a face-to-face, sort of a live meeting is important, perhaps where we've got an opportunity for Q&A afterwards, or some sort of interaction during that information download. The second type of meeting is a decision meeting, a meeting where a decision needs to be made. Be very clear about that decision and make sure you get to it at the end of the meeting and write it down. And then the third type of meeting is to discuss, to take input from people. This may be a project or a process that you're taking a look at, and if you need the input from people, it can be a very efficient way of doing that if you collect together the relevant stakeholders and take their input. But there shouldn't be any meetings outside of those 3. So you're either downloading information in a live context, you're making a decision, or you're taking input. Don't schedule a meeting if it's not one of those 3. Tip number 4, quick and scrappy. Perfection, I think, is the enemy of good or sometimes great, and we often find ourselves in a situation where we're analysing something to the nth degree and trying to ensure that every last I is dotted and T is crossed. This is a great example of over-engineering or striving for perfection. Quick and scrappy is a really good rule of thumb that we use at Google a lot, where something that's sort of minimum viable product, if you like, the minimum that's needed in order to get a project off the ground, try a process, get a product out there, is enough. And often we won't already have all of the answers, and it's not possible actually to get to a fully formed view. So this is where a minimum viable product, a quick and scrappy solution, is a great way to start. You can refine that, you can shut it down if it's not right, but you can change direction really quickly, and often you can get something in place on a short time frame. So quick and scrappy. Tip number 5, experimentation. We love to experiment at Google. We do it with our engineering products, our products that you and I end up being consumers of, launching an alpha, sometimes a beta with a small audience, testing it out and using that period to refine, and then when we're happy, sort of scaling it into full-scale production. We often also do that with processes. So in my job, which is strategy and operations, we're often doing this sort of innovation with things like organizational design, or perhaps a new process, perhaps a different way of doing something, maybe a new meeting format. And we borrow the same concept from engineering. We do pilots and experiments quite frequently, and that gives us a great opportunity to start with something that's good enough in order to test it, refine it, and then let it go into the wild when it's ready. So those are my 5 tips. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me.